Michael Brody never believed a black woman could belong here, not in a quiet, affluent neighborhood like this. Not with that confident stride like she owned the whole street, and certainly not wearing high-end athletic gear, jogging past manicured lawns reserved for white upper-class families. So he flipped on the patrol car's lights, stopped the vehicle, got out, approached her like a hunter closing in on prey, for one reason only. She didn't look at him. She wasn't afraid. She didn't flinch. Identification. He barked. She answered calmly, "I'm not carrying any, because I didn't do anything wrong." And just like that, cold metal cuffs locked around her wrists, on the sidewalk of the very neighborhood she lived in, because to him, a confident black woman was already suspicious enough to be a criminal. Michael Brody never believed a black woman could belong here. Not in Brookstone Ridge, a pristine suburb where lawns were trimmed like pudding greens, mailboxes painted white, and not a single leaf dared linger on the driveways. Not with a stride like that, confident, deliberate, as if she owned the street, and certainly not in designer athletic wear. Jogging past turf reserved for those with at least 3 bank accounts and a private attorney. He spotted her as his patrol car rolled slowly through the Elmwood intersection, on cloud sneakers, Beats headphones, an Apple Watch, and skin the color of deep bronze, standing out starkly against the bright white birch-lined sidewalks. She didn't glance at him, didn't slow down, didn't give the wary deference most black people instinctively offered when passing a police cruiser, and that was reason enough for him to check. Brody flipped on the lights. The Ford Interceptor gave a soft ping as he threw it into park. He leaned forward in his seat, shoulders angled like a man preparing for a routine contact. "Suspicious jogger," he muttered into the radio. "Possibly just left a residence." He didn't wait for dispatch to respond. It was habit, like noting a deer wandering near the highway. He opened the door and stepped out. His right hand rested gently on his belt just above the Glock holstered in black leather. Not drawn, but clearly visible. This wasn't his first time, and not the first time he believed he was doing the right thing. The woman kept jogging, until she heard the footfalls behind her boots on pavement. She removed one earbud and turned. Her forehead glistened with sweat, but her eyes steady, unflinching. "Can I help you, officer?" Her voice was calm, not confrontational, but not submissive either. And to Michael Brody, that was a problem. "Where are you coming from?" he asked. She glanced back down the street behind her. "Home. I jog here every morning." "Where's home 3 blocks west?" "Green Hill Drive." "You carrying ID?" She blinked. "I'm jogging." "No. I don't carry documents to run in my own neighborhood." He smirked. That dry, impatient kind of smirk. "You know, there have been a few thefts around here lately. Unlocked cars, high-end stuff." "You passed by a white BMW." She exhaled clearly. "I passed it. Didn't look in. Didn't steal anything." "I didn't say you did." Brody said, stepping a little closer, "I'm just asking. You didn't look at me. Didn't nod. Didn't react. And usually, innocent people respond differently." Her eyes sharpened. Or maybe innocent people are just tired of pretending to be innocent every time they see a cop. She crossed her arms. "I live here. I follow the rules. And I'm exhausted from having to prove I'm harmless every time I leave my house." Brody said nothing, but in his mind everything about her was being labeled defiant, resistant, non-compliant. "I need you to present identification," he said, his tone tightening. She didn't argue. She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling someone who can explain federal law and civil rights better than I can." That's when he moved. Not aggressively, not loudly, but with purpose. He reached for her wrist, batted away the phone, and spun her toward the cruiser. You're under arrest for obstructing an investigation." The click of the handcuffs echoed coldly in broad daylight. And in that moment, everything began to unravel. Across the street, a man turned off his garden hose. A woman froze mid-step on the walking trail. A teenager pulled out a phone and started recording. But Brody didn't care. All he saw was a woman refusing a lawful order. All he believed was he had the authority, and she had crossed a line. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have imagined, was that this woman was not just a civilian. She was the one person in the county who held the keys to the entire legal system. Vanessa Moore leaned against the hood of the patrol car, her wrists burning from the too tight cuffs. Her athletic shirt was soaked in sweat. A smear of dust clung to her left knee from the rough takedown, but her eyes hadn't cracked. They were sharp as razors. Not the eyes of someone under arrest, but the eyes of someone taking mental notes. Officer Michael Brody stood half a meter away, one hand on the cuffs, the other pressing his radio. 10 to 15. Black female. Approx. 40-45. Refused to show ID. Obstructing administrative check. Requesting backup and transport unit. Voices crackled back through the radio. Brody didn't really listen. He didn't need to. To him, this was too minor to matter until it became too big to contain. Across the street, a middle-aged man pulled out his phone and began recording. An elderly woman near a mailbox turned pale. A kid on a bike froze mid-pedal, eyes wide. Vanessa said nothing. She inhaled slow and deep, like calculating how much oxygen she'd need before diving into deep water. Then she turned her head, locked eyes with Brody, and spoke. Her voice was soft but rang like a bronze bell struck in a stone cathedral. "You're sinking your career inch by inch." "Officer?" Brody raised a brow. "Are you threatening me?" "No," she said flatly. "Just telling the truth." He smirked. "Everyone thinks they've got rights once they're cuffed." Vanessa let out a small, dry laugh, devoid of humor. "The problem is, I'm not under arrest. You think I am. But you just stepped into something way above your pay grade." "Oh, yeah." Brody narrowed his eyes. "Who are you, mayor or something higher?" She said, her tone unchanged. That's when the black SUV appeared rolling in silently from the far end of the street. No sirens, no official plates, but anyone in the system would recognize it. Not a civilian vehicle. Brody turned. The driver stepped out first, a Latino man in a dark dress shirt and black sunglasses. Then the rear door opened. Out stepped a tall, silver-haired white man with an aura of quiet power. He wore a tailored navy suit, no tie, and a small ID badge clipped to his chest. Albert Reyes, U.S. District Attorney's Office. No one had called him. But he showed up. Reyes approached, eyes passing over Vanessa, then pausing at the cuffs. "Remove them. Immediately." His voice was low but thunderous, tempered in 100 federal courtrooms and cross-examinations. Brody hesitated. "I'm sorry, sir, you are—" "I just got off a call with Miss Moore," Reyes said evenly. "The woman you have cuffed? The woman you detained in public without any legitimate criminal charge? The woman you should be standing at attention for?" Brody froze. His hands trembled slightly. His eyes darted between Vanessa and Reyes. You just said she's District Attorney Vanessa Moore." Reyes replied. "Federal prosecutor assigned to this district. The one with authority to launch a misconduct investigation against you. The one who could have had you arrested. But she didn't. She called me." No one spoke for the next 3 seconds. Only the rustling of oak leaves in the wind, and a distant car horn breaking the stillness. Brody swallowed, fumbling with his keys. He unlocked the cuffs. Vanessa didn't speak. She pulled her hands back, rubbed her reddened wrists, eyes never leaving him. Across the street, a woman called out. She lives here. I see her jogging every Monday morning. She helped my son when he had a bike accident. A teenager added louder. I got it on video when he grabbed her phone. I'll send it if you need it. Reyes turned back to Brody. We'll be needing a full incident report, and I trust your department will cooperate. For now, I suggest you leave, before this becomes a media firestorm. Brody said nothing. He walked back to his cruiser like a man leaving the courtroom after hearing his sentence. Vanessa stood there uncuffed but not triumphant. She didn't smile, didn't retaliate. She simply watched him go with a look that said, "You just proved everything I've always known. And I'm sorry. You didn't see it sooner." Vanessa Moore sat inside the black SUV, red cuff marks still visible on her wrists. Reyes sat across from her, silent. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he wanted to give her space to breathe. This wasn't the first time she had been mistaken for someone who didn't belong, but it was the first time she'd felt steel around her wrists. "I didn't want to call you," she said softly, voice calm as ever. "But I knew the system doesn't correct itself when all we do is walk away quietly." Reyes nodded. "You handled it right. And braver than most I've seen, even those who wear robes and sit on benches." The SUV rolled out of Brookstone Ridge, leaving behind a silence that the residents would talk about for weeks. But the story didn't end at the curb. It began again that Monday morning inside a federal justice conference room in Northern District, Georgia HQ. 10:15 a.m. 8th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over Atlanta, but no one in the room was admiring the view. Michael Brody entered with his supervising lieutenant. No uniform, no badge, just a thick file under his arm and eyes that wouldn't meet anyone's. Across the table sat Vanessa Moore, now in a charcoal blazer, hair tied back, with a bronze nameplate in front of her, Vanessa Moore. District Attorney. She didn't greet him, didn't nod. She simply opened the file. "Officer Brody," she began, her voice clear but not raised. "Do you know why you're here?" Brody gave a slight nod. "I detained the wrong person, because I didn't recognize you were the DA." Vanessa looked up. "You didn't detain the wrong person because I'm the DA. You detained the wrong person because I'm a black woman jogging in a wealthy neighborhood. Your mistake wasn't who I was, it was that you assumed I couldn't possibly be someone." The room went still. No one interrupted, not even Reyes, who sat in as the federal observer. Vanessa continued. "Under Title 42 of the U.S. Code, using authority to detain someone based on personal bias can be prosecuted." Brody licked his lips. I didn't mean to be racist. Intent is irrelevant. Action is what matters. You didn't ask for ID from the white women walking that morning. You didn't rest your hand on your weapon when they didn't look at you. You only did that with me. And that's the issue." Across the table, an internal affairs rep nodded, jotting notes. Vanessa never broke eye contact, and for the first time, there was a hint of sorrow in her voice. "I don't want to destroy your career, but I also can't allow you to keep patrolling with unchecked bias." Now Reyes spoke up. "Our office will recommend an ethics review and mandatory retraining on civil rights law. If completed successfully, you may return, but not in your current position." Brody exhaled slow, tired. And for a moment, his eyes met Vanessa's. No longer confrontational, just acknowledging. "I used to think I was fair, but that day, I didn't see a woman. I saw a threat, and I don't know why." Vanessa leaned forward. "I know why. Because the system taught you that people like me must always prove we're harmless while people like you never have to prove you're fair. And that day you failed. And you're not alone. The meeting ended without applause. No winner, no redemption arc. Only one raw truth. Justice doesn't come from titles, but from how power is used when no one's watching. Michael Brody sat in his car, parked in his own driveway, but he didn't open the door. The rain had stopped. Sunlight slipped between the leaves, like someone had intentionally cracked the clouds just enough to let a little truth in. The internal affairs report sat unopened on the passenger seat, but he didn't need to read it. He already knew what it said. Indefinite suspension, mandatory retraining, recommended transfer to a non-public facing position. His wife had called 3 times. He hadn't answered. In his head, one image kept replaying Vanessa Moore's eyes as she looked at him. No anger, no hate, just disappointment. And somehow that look was more terrifying than any courtroom he'd ever stood in. Because it didn't declare guilt. It let him find it. He had believed he was one of the good ones in uniform. 25 years in the force. Never fired a shot. Never used excessive force. He thought that was enough to prove his integrity. But the thing that had kept him awake for the past 3 nights wasn't losing his badge. Wasn't the angry crowd. Wasn't the cameras. It was the question Vanessa had whispered during the hearing. How many others did you do this to before there was a camera watching? Brody leaned his forehead against the steering wheel. And suddenly a memory surfaced. 2014. He once stopped a young black student riding a bike at night. Said the rear light was too dim. The kid didn't argue. Had no lawyer. Ended up detained for 5 hours. Brody couldn't remember his name. Only the way the kid stared at the floor and didn't say a word the entire time. Back then, I called it a routine stop. What do I call it now, Brody thought. He pulled out his wallet. A photo of his daughter fell out. She was studying law, wanted to be a prosecutor to help people no one believes. She once told him, "Dad, you taught me that silence in the face of wrong is complicity." And now, if she knew the truth, how would she look at him? Brody opened the car door. The air was cold, but clearer. He stepped out slowly, like a man walking out of a courtroom inside himself. He knew he wasn't an evil racist cop, but he also knew he was no longer the good guy who didn't know better. Somewhere between the two was a gray space where he had lived for years, and now there was nowhere left to hide. Next week, he'd begin the retraining course. It wasn't required, but he chose to go, not to save his job, but to make sure he never repeated himself. Before heading inside, he paused. He looked down the empty street, the same street where he once saw a black woman jogging, and assumed she didn't belong. She was right, he murmured. And I'm just now beginning to see it.